I grew up in Jerusalem.
I grew up in a city called Rehovot in central Israel.
I grew up in Haifa city. Basically, I'm a Palestinian who lives in Israel.
This is a community of young Israeli and Palestinian musicians going against the norm of division back home.
There are buses that Palestinians cannot go on and streets that Palestinians cannot walk on just because they're Palestinians, where Israelis can walk on. And knowing that this is happening in 2014 is just insane.
Really, less than 1% of the Israeli and Palestinian population has ever come together for a meaningful and sustained trust-building experience. In the last 6 years, we've worked with about 100 across Israel and Palestine. Currently, we have 3 ensembles that meet weekly in Haifa, Jerusalem, and in Jaffa.
They call themselves Heartbeat.
It creates this deep understanding of who you are and what you believe in and what moves you and what excites you. And I think I can hear a love song in French without understanding it and still feel something and understand where this person is coming from.
On this day, they're in Burlington, Vermont, just one stop on a tour of the East Coast. By the end, they'll play in front of members of U.S. Congress. Israelis and Palestinians have a long history of conflict, now living amongst one another, but not always intermingling in a tense, fragile atmosphere.
Even the word collaboration has a terrible connotation in some circles, where people are afraid of working with the enemy, and they I think, there's a deep history of people spying on their families and this kind of thing. So we actually don't use that word, but we talk about cooperation, and certainly it's very much against the norm.
Heartbeat's origins began with a grant from MTV. Now they're spreading their message with live performances, but also online.
Buka Mishmish is a song, we wrote it I think 3 years ago in the desert, like altogether I think it was like 30 people actually working on that song. And Buka Mishmish is a sentence in Arabic, an old saying. It kind of means when pigs fly. And we changed it to Bukra fi Mishmish, which means kind of pigs are flying.
Their biggest impact so far might be with the young musicians themselves.
In our country, a lot of people think it's impossible for us to get along, for Israelis and Palestinians to sit together in a room and find a connection. A lot of people think it's just impossible. So it's about talking about when the impossible kind of becomes possible.
This is the world we're inheriting, and we believe we need to reach that 25%. And once 25% of the population comes to trust and respect the other side, then that idea of trust and respect will become unstoppable.
For Mountain Lake Journal, I'm Tamika Weatherspoon.